now to introduce a champion of liberty here in the state of New Jersey. A gentleman who saw fit to defy a judge's order as a freeholder, who risked going to jail rather than raise taxes because that was not the right thing to do. State senator that has gone across the aisle to bring together people who believe in honesty and decency at our nation's airports, who has led the fight for civil liberties here in New Jersey, that has led the fight for fiscal responsibility in Trenton, and here we have Senator Mike Doherty.
He just showed up.
Looks like we have a special guest that's arrived. This is truly a great day for New Jersey and the United States of America. Because I'll tell you what, folks, we're going to take our country back. The United States is unique in the world because we have a constitution. A constitutional republic, a government of limited powers. Unfortunately, for the last 100 years, the Constitution has been ignored in the United States. Our freedom and liberty is slipping away.
Take it back.
A few miles up the road, about 235 years ago, George Washington crossed the Delaware River. And on Christmas night, he led an attack against the tyrannical government, the British, and threw them off the continent. And we established a constitutional republic that has provided more prosperity, more liberty, and more freedom for American citizens or anybody else around the world. And in 2012, we're going to elect a man to restore that constitutional freedom. Why I'm supporting Ron Paul for president in 2012. Because our country's hurting, and Ron Paul for 30 years has been telling the truth about what we need to do to turn the United States around and restore our constitutional republic, to restore liberty and prosperity and economic freedom for all Americans. I showed up at the United States Military Academy at West Point, and I took an oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And I stand here today as a proud military veteran. Who served my country overseas and was honored to do it. I stand here today as the father of 3 young men. With my wife, we have 3 sons, all who have served in the Army, the Marines, and the Air Force serving our country. And I'm happy that I served in the military because it allows me to say this. The U.S. government needs to use our military very carefully.
That's right.
When it's in the national security interest of the United States.
That's
and
it.
the United States alone. You can serve only one master, the American people. We need to follow the Constitution, and the Constitution's very clear. If you are going to use our military, you must get a declaration of war first from Congress. Who's kidding who? These endless wars are bleeding our country white, are bankrupting our nation. And it's not being done in the national security interests of the United States.
No.
There's a simple solution. We have a candidate for president, Ron Paul, has a simple solution. Follow the Constitution, get a declaration of war, and right now, bring our troops home! We have, if you had to pick any spot on the face of the earth, any country, strategically located, you would pick the United States to have a country with a strong national defense. We have the Atlantic Ocean, 3,000 miles. The Pacific Ocean, 4,000 miles on the other side. It took 3 years of logistical planning for the Allies to invade Normandy, and they were just going 20 miles across the English Channel. We ought to take advantage of our strategic location on Earth. Bring our boys home, and put that money back to use in the United States of America. The free enterprise system, that's another reason I'm supporting Ron Paul. He recognizes the greatness of the free enterprise system, that you serve your fellow man. You produce valuable goods and services. But what we have in the United States is a gross, ugly distortion of the free enterprise system. He's talked about the Federal Reserve. Ending the Federal Reserve. And you know, I want all of you to do me a favor right now. We have this massive cavern we're in right now. We got a lot of state legislators walking around. I want you to tell them what you think about the Federal Reserve and auditing the Fed. You want to tell them? End the Fed! 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 Amazingly, this Federal Reserve System that Ron Paul has been talking about for 30 years, giving out trillions of dollars of secret loans to foreign banks. And guess who's got to pay it back? The American people. That's wrong, and it's got to stop. And finally, we have a candidate for president, Dr. Ron Paul, who realizes that you can't pick and choose what parts of the Constitution you'd like to see enforced. what parts of the Constitution we want to enforce. As a former military man, after September 11th, I thought the first thing our government would do is secure our borders. But our borders today remain wide open, and the government, instead of doing the tough thing, securing our borders and getting control of that, they've decided that they're going to terrorize Americans with the TSA and airport screening. I'm sorry, the Fourth Amendment gives you the right to privacy, and before some government agent can stick their hands down your pants, they need to go to a judge, present probable cause, and get that judge to issue a warrant. How about securing the borders instead of terrorizing New Jersey's motto is liberty and prosperity. Congressman Ron Paul knows without liberty, you will have no prosperity. Right. Congressman Ron Paul, by your support here today, is sending his message not only throughout New Jersey, but throughout the entire United States. He will be our nominee for the Republican Party for president in 2012. He will stand for what our founding fathers believed in. He will restore the Constitution. He will return economic justice to the United States. He will use our defense only when necessary, our military. And without further ado, let's have a great New Jersey welcome. Which one? There, how about that? Yeah! Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for this nice reception. But the whole thing is Mike just gave this speech. What am I going to do? Yeah! You've already touched on the important issues. You know, foreign policy, economic liberty, personal liberty, and the Federal Reserve. That's but it is great, and you know, one of the reasons I've admired Mike so much is because of his background, his understanding of the military. Because too often, I'm sure he's been on the receiving end of it. If you're not anxious to go into any war any time, that for some reason you're against the troops, you're un-American. You know, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad when you want to obey the Constitution, have a strong national defense, only go to war when necessary. Then they say, "Oh, you don't support the troops. Oh, you are un-American. You're not patriotic." So I think it's great because he certainly identifies and understands the military. But you know, something else has come out, not only in 2008, but in this campaign as well, that I think speaks in favor of what we're doing on foreign policy is our campaign gets more money than all the other candidates. Momentarily, when they made those charges, I got to thinking, you know, well, what am I going to say about support for the troops? And then I got to thinking, oh, that's right. I was in the military once too, you know. And it was in the 60s. I was drafted in 1962, and I don't believe in the draft, let me tell you that. But I was drafted. I was taken out of my medical training and went into the Air Force. And at
that time when I got off. When I got off active duty and went into reserves, it was in 1965. 1965 was the year of the great escalation. A bad war going badly, and then what do? We doubled the size of the war, and that was 65. And I can remember just getting off active duty and thinking, I don't want them to escalate that war. That makes no sense whatsoever. So I understand and identify with the military. What about the reservists and people in the guard units have been over 2 or 3 or 4 times? And they're tired of it, they're worn out, they don't see an end to it. It is because it's an undeclared war, you don't see you don't have an end point for victory. But this was, going into Iraq was very, very annoying, and something I was very much involved in. And for a year or two before we went into Iraq, and a long time before 9/11, they had decided to go into Iraq. 9/11 was the excuse to go into Iraq. But we had a debate in the International Affairs Committee. I'm on that committee, and it was to give the president just authority to do whatever he wanted. And I said, well, you can't do that. I said, he's going to go to war. You have to declare war up or down. So I said, I'm going to introduce a resolution, a declaration of war. I said, I'm not going to vote for it. So if you want to go to war, you ought to vote for it and be upfront and be more honest. Well, of course, we had a voice vote, and nobody was for going and making a declaration. So I said, I'm going to have a recorded vote. And that's when they really got angry. So we went through the recorded vote, and nobody voted for it. But one thing that they told me during this debate, which sort of stuck with me, they say, well, we know you're the expert on the Constitution, but that part of the Constitution is anachronistic. We don't follow that part anymore. But doesn't that tell you something about the problems we have and the place where we are now in our economy and everything else? Because the Constitution, if you can go to war without a declaration, pretty soon they're going to be developing the Department of Education without a constitutional amendment. All these kind of things. They just take it for granted that they can do what they want, whether they're fighting the drug war, overseas war, or whatever. And little respect for the Constitution. But the Constitution is not overly rigid because we can amend it. Others say, and they've been taught for so long in our school system, that the Constitution has to be flexible and modern, therefore it doesn't mean anything. The rule of law is important. What is written in the Constitution is important, and so we have drifted a long way from that. So we live in an age today where it's crucial. I mean, we're up against it. So many problems. The economics is the #1 problem, and the jobs. But, I complain a whole lot about what's happening. Been doing it for a long time, trying to tell people there was a bubble and that we better watch out. We don't need to go to these wars. We need a sound monetary system. But, the whole thing is if we'd only listen to our founders and understand what they were talking about and what we should do, we wouldn't have to be putting up with this. And yet we have been, and it's getting a lot worse. But I'll tell you where I get my encouragement, and I see a few here today, these young people.
Yeah.
Young people. There'll be a few out there a little bit over 30, and we do real well with the people under 30. I said, well, if you're over 30 and you identify with what I'm saying, just say you're young too and you're under 30. But the other day, we stopped over at LSU in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and they said, well, we're going to have a little rally there on the campus. And they had to keep the people, they used the students and they were all students from the campus. And they had to close the doors after they got 1,250 in. There's a lot of enthusiasm on the campuses. So I do not worry about the long-term future of this country. The short-term future is a different story. What we do in this election, who we elect for president, what we do with our Congress, it's very important, but ultimately, the type of government we have in Washington is a reflection of the people. The people's attitude, what kind of government they want, is the kind that they get. I know most of us here are pretty unhappy with it, but the majority of the American people have tolerated this. Unfortunately, it's been the majority of the Republicans and the Democrats that have put up with so much, because the spending goes with either party, and yet we're now at a point where it can continue. Yes, there's been a lot of warnings by a lot more people than myself, But the debt is too big, the deficit is growing, the spending doesn't quit. They talk about cutting spending. They're not talking about. Do you believe it when they think they're going to cut something? And they say, well, we're going to cut, the super committee is supposed to cut $1.5 trillion out of the next 10 years proposed increases. The only thing that counts is this year's budget. But it's not strictly a budgetary problem. What we have is a philosophy of government problem. We need to change policy, and then government would shrink. We no longer should be, nor do we have a right to be, the policemen of the world, and that's why we need to see it as local as possible. But we have another problem. The enemy, those who oppose us, not only do they like federal government, they like international government. And we're at the point now where we go to war under UN resolutions and NATO resolutions. We're not even in consultation with the Congress. I mean, that has to change. And that is the reason that we have to think about our rights, our personal rights. To me, individuals have rights and groups do not have rights. Groups do not have rights. Too often in our history we punish people because they belong to a certain group, and that was wrong. But just as wrong is giving people special benefits and privileges because they belong to a group. But individuals are to have their rights and to be protected. And there's still a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of injustices in our judicial system because we don't understand that. There is not a fair deal in most of our courts. It has to do with monitoring things and belonging to certain groups. But personal liberty is really the goal that we have to seek. Because if we know and understand that our liberties don't come from our government, but that our liberties come from our Creator, then the natural consequence for this is that if you have a right to your life, if our life comes from our Creator and our liberties come, wouldn't it be logical to assume that you should be able to keep the fruits of your labor? People, and this has been true throughout history, and I think we hear from a few of them today. There's a few that belong to the authoritarian group. They believe they know everything. They want to police the world, they want to run your personal life, and they want to redistribute the wealth. Well, I don't believe in that thing. I believe that you have a right to your life and to your liberty. So authoritarians and believing that they know what is best for you and what to do. But then there's also a large number of group that complacently think, well, I want government to take care of me. As long as government promises it to me, let them take care of it, and then we'll call it an entitlement. Oh, an entitlement is a right. Oh, think of all the rights everybody has. But where do those things come from?
My
if you want something for free, you have to steal it from somebody else. And the whole system is based on theft. The idea that you can redistribute wealth and bring it over. But then there's a certain segment of the society that are neither the authoritarians or those who want to be taken care of from cradle to grave. There are those of us that exist in a growing number, even here in New Jersey, that believe what we want is our freedom. We want our liberty. We want to take care of ourselves. We want an honest monetary system. We want a sensible foreign policy. Oh, yes, you don't want to have the government take care of anybody else. Of course, the government is just your next-door neighbor. No, they claim that if you believe in freedom, that you don't have compassion. but all you have to do is study history. If you want to look at all of history, you'll find out that famine and destitute came under dictators and kings and authoritarians. And it is true that true famine only occurs when the government gets out of control and runs things. But guess what? Poverty and poor and people who are going hungry in this country, that number is growing. Why? Because the size and scope of government is growing as well. And that's what it leads to. Freedom can solve our problems. If you truly believe that you want to help your fellow man, you have to have confidence and an understanding how freedom works. That force does not work. Force on our personal lives or force in the economy is a negative, and it does a great deal of detriment. Spending money on bombs that you bomb countries around the world, and you spend money on rebuilding the infrastructure we just blew up, guess what? It diminishes our ability to take care of our own infrastructure, take care of the health needs of the people in this country, and give decent jobs to the people in this country. Is a rather new idea. It's not ancient. Most of history has been dealt with tyrants and kings and pharaohs and all kinds of dictators. But today we find out that something has to change, and that is what we're involved in. Freedom's this new idea. Although we've had a great test of it in the last 100 years, we have not been very good protectors of liberty. We have let our guard down. So you can say, yes, it's the Congress, it's that president, it's the Supreme Court. All of those people are at fault. But you know what? It's the fault of the people, too, because the prevailing attitude of the people. We have lost our confidence in ourselves, confidence in our liberty, confidence in understanding how the market works, and this is the reason that we have this kind of government. But, like I said, there's a revolution going on with the young people. There's a revolution going on with the people. That we have to just go backwards. Whether people tell me, oh, Ron Paul wants to go back to the gold standard. Well, yes, I want honest money. That's a good idea. I want gold. It was not a perfect standard. We can improve on the ideas of liberty, better understanding of economic policy, better understanding of monetary policy, and a better understanding how wasteful spending overseas did not make us rich. So there's every reason in the world why we can't argue the case for improving on what we had. But we're in a real struggle for this right now. Because it can go either way. As optimistic as I am, because I meet so many people that are enthusiastic, if it goes the other way and there's a breakdown of law and order, and that is likely to come, the predictions of those people who believe they have a right to what you make and what you earn, and it doesn't come, they'll be on the streets. So it could be very, very dangerous. So therefore, ideas do have consequences. The only difference is are they good ideas or bad ideas? I happen to think that this country was built on good ideas, and freedom is a good idea. Individual liberty without discrimination is a great idea. So therefore, let's all be optimistic and believe that we can not only survive the emergency now, but come out of this stronger than ever before. Thank you.